Good afternoon, Huskies, and welcome to another installment of our UConn Alumni Relations Career Webinars. My name is Joshua Peru, and I'm the Director of Alumni Engagement here for the UConn Office of Alumni Relations. And I'm going to be your moderator today. We're excited to have you join us today for today's presentation. We are about to get ourselves right on track for productivity and advanced time management techniques. Today's presentation will be featuring UConn's preferred partner for executive and career coaching services, CEO of Protem Partners, John Brady. Before we begin, a few areas of note. There will be an opportunity to ask questions at the end of the presentation, so please feel free to type them into your question box on your control panel. And at the end of the presentation, we'll get to as many as time allows. Number two, a survey will be sent to you as a follow-up. We would appreciate if you filled out those surveys when you can and provide us detailed information about what type of programming you want, as well as your thoughts on today's presentation. Three, the webinar will be recorded, so you do have the opportunity to come back to these at the end of the presentation, so you don't have to worry about scribbling down fast and furious notes. Please visit our YouTube page at youtube.com/UConn Alumni sometime over the next week to view. And lastly, be sure to check out our events calendar for upcoming webinars, as well as events in your area. You can visit the events page at uconnalumni.com/events. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our presenter today. John J. Brady, otherwise known as JB to his friends and family, is the founder and chief executive of Protem Partners, LLC, a leading business development, client engagement, and solutions in both the corporate and individual lines of business. Mr. Brady is a 22-year veteran of the education, banking, and technology sectors with executive experience in sales, marketing, operations, staff training and development, business turnarounds, and growth acceleration. Mr. Brady's recent contributions include a lengthy tenure as executive director for numerous programs of the College Board, as well as chief operating officer of Hire Next, Inc. He's a regular columnist, media commentator, and speaker on matters related to career, education, assessment, and transformational leadership within corporations and nonprofits. He holds a Bachelor of Science degree in English Education, a Master of Education degree in Higher Education, both from the School of Education at Boston University, as well as an MBA from the Olin Graduate School of Business at Babson College, which has recognized him as a distinguished alumnus in 2006. Beyond professional pursuits, Mr. Brady is a board member for the American Legion's Boys State Program in Massachusetts, where he has served as a counselor and faculty member for over 25 years. He is also an adventure traveler, having explored over 30 nations on 6 continents. He's a native of Boston's South Shore, and Mr. Brady lives with his husband, Reverend Trent Williams, who serves as a pastor to a church in southern New Jersey and provides speech and oratory coaching services to clients of the firm. The couple currently maintain their home in Delaware County in Pennsylvania, where John holds one of his main offices in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, as well as Boston, Massachusetts. Without further ado, turn it over to John. John, thanks for joining us today, and thanks for wearing your Husky hat.
Thank you so much, Josh. Great to have another day as an honorary Husky, and this go-around reporting live from the campus and stores, which is a special privilege. Got to meet with a bunch of folks earlier today. We have some more this afternoon, and I think a few of those folks that I got to meet with this morning are even on. So thanks again for your time, and thanks for joining us, and let's jump right into things. The time will go quickly. One of the challenges, obviously, if you've come on here, and it's certainly an increasing topic in the blogosphere and elsewhere, is the extent to which we try to do more in less time, that productivity, focus, concentration are challenges for most of us, but the idea of time management at some level has been around really just about as long as there have been knowledge work and professionals. One of the problems that I have with it, more with the language, I suppose, is that most time management models, first of all, the language implies that we manage time when, in fact, I tend to think of us as really managing the resources and what we do with our time. We really don't control time, although we try to tell ourselves that we do. Time kind of has its own beat, and it passes with or without us, and we decide how to best apply our time and make use of the tools that are available to us, including not just technological tools, but other resources as well. And in the workplace, there has always been a challenge for concentration, but I think now it gets blamed a lot on technology. If I think back to, I even in preparing for this, went through some old job descriptions, and I couldn't get the print to show on the slide, otherwise I would have had them. But it's interesting how many different variations there are on what we now see in almost every job description as some form of multitasking, and I really wish somebody would do away with that language. But we've always had to choose, not just in the workplace, but really as a species, on where to focus our attention and our time. And certainly, while there are more distractions now, the idea of work product, of knowledge work, and for most of us who are college graduates and beyond, most of what we have to generate and create is somehow abstract in some way or another. But there's a lot more in our space competing for our time. It often, when I talk to folks, gets blamed on instant communication, and I hear this a lot, the concept of, in an era of instant communication, as though somehow things are different. We actually have had instant communication in the professional and white-collar world for a really long time. So long as there's been a telephone in the office, that is truly instant communication, and it's synchronous. Someone answers, someone calls, and presuming you've answered it, that's instantaneous. The idea of emails and instant messages and so forth, they're instant delivery, but they're not really instant communication. And part of that misnomer is, I think, one of many things that erodes our ability to really focus on the things that we need to, and by extension of focus, be that much more productive. On your screen is photo, depending on how old you are, you might actually remember seeing these around a lot. I certainly do, and I still remember when I would visit my dad at the office, and there were phones like this on every single desk, and in an open floor plan office, there was the receptionist that was calling out all day long in a very, very busy place for 8 hours which call was on which line. There was no, it was all shared space, and the buttons on the bottom were all lit up. There was, it was lit solid for someone who was on the line. It was flashing slowly if there was a call ringing, and it was flashing really fast if there was a call on hold. And, people were just sort of used to that, but I still remember the receptionist kind of belting out all of this noise throughout the day, as calls came and went before we were using email and so forth. And, often juggling multiple calls at a time. And I put our names on here, but you can imagine someone having to repeat to you all the time which line is yours and which one to jump to. And, of course, the phone's ringing in the background. So a lot of that hasn't really changed, but somehow when we went to electronic, digital, text messaging, whether it's in the form of email or instant message, or text SMSs, whichever way it's coming about, everybody thought there was something new and instantaneous about that. All that really meant was we had an additional medium. I'm going to use email as an example for purposes of illustration, and then we'll kind of blow it out and go beyond that. The way I'm going to proceed through our time here, our brief webinar time, is I'm going to explain a couple of the things that I see as the drivers and the whys, and then go to the strategies after. The way a lot of time management is taught and done when people hire professional trainers and even professional time management people, there's a focus on a solution before you know exactly what the issues and the challenges are. And they vary from job to job and person to person. So in order for you to even get a sense for which of the recommendations that I might put out there would fit for you as an individual and you in your work environment, it's easier if you understand it. And certainly part of our work when we work directly with clients at really all levels, whether they're entry level or really very senior executives, including the C-suite, always trying to manage all of these resources a lot better. But again, you need to, that's where we can get really certainly specialized. But here we're going to focus likely to work for you, or at least you'll have better odds of finding systems that will work for you. Email is one that just comes up all the time as one illustration of something that I think really it's great that we can deliver messages instantaneously, but it of course comes at a price, right? That's something that has changed in our world for, depending on your age, those of us who are, I guess Gen X and beyond, we kind of got to the work world with email and the web, and for some of you, you never knew email's even passé for a lot of you, I realize. But right now, depending on which study you look at, and I looked at about 4 different studies in the Western world, most corporate, I took an average of them, most corporate employees, most white-collar folks are getting about 125 emails a day. Now, a lot of that is junk, a lot of it is FYI, some of it is advertising, but At 125 emails per day, and by the way, that's presuming about an 8.5-hour window, right? So some period of time mixed in with whatever time you're getting away from your desk. At 125 emails a day, most of us have some sort of alert system to let us know that an email has arrived when we're working. In this case, if I presume a desk environment and you're not out in the field, most folks will have some kind of visual cue. It can be as significant as one of those ghosted images that Outlook might put in the upper corner with a little preview. It might be something as small as a little envelope icon in the corner. If you're out on the road, it could be on a mobile device, something that it might, your smartphone might vibrate or whatever. Perhaps there's even an audible cue. But if we just take the visual for one moment, just doing some really simple math, knowledge work requires high-level cognitive functioning and focus. If you have something that is distracting you at any level, in this case visual, at 125 emails a day and you do some simple division, you're getting about 16 distractions every hour, about every 3 minutes and 45 seconds. That's a really small unit of time. Most of us think that that's not such a big deal, that there's some kind of cue, visual, audible, or even sensory if it's just a vibration. But each one of those is some sort of digression from wherever your area of focus is. Now, for most of the people that I've worked with, and I've worked with many, in addition to a visual cue, there's usually an audible one as well, whether it's a tone, or if they have it on a setting for a vibrate mode of some kind, you can still actually hear it even if it's sitting in their pocket. Well, there's a delay. Your brain is moving a lot faster, and even if it sounds like those two things are coming in at the same time, maybe you hear the little chime and the ghosted image comes up, but your brain is processing those at a few milliseconds apart from one another, and because they're coming through different sensory systems, now you've really doubled the number of distractions. So we again continue with our division. You've now on average got about 1 minute and 53 seconds to really focus on something before more than likely email coming in is going to take some part of your focus away and then get back on track. It's a small portion of your focus, but it's still a portion of it. And then for probably better than 85% of the folks that I've worked with, they've got the same email account alerting on multiple devices. So if you're at your desk and it's coming up on your screen and it's coming up audibly, right, on your laptop or your desktop to the extent you might have one, maybe it's coming up also on their smartphone device with any one of 1 or 2 alerts. It could be something as simple as the light flashing or what have you. Then you add other messages that might come in from your personal email accounts, texting from, from your kids, from your spouse, whatever, right? In some cases, coworkers, instant messages if you have an IM platform at work, especially if it's in a secure environment. Very, very quickly, you start to get up to north of 64 distractions every hour, which means that you're basically being assaulted. The one thing you're relying on the most, your brain, your intellect, is somehow getting about, you get north of 60 very, very quickly, and that's if I'm being conservative. Certainly for people who are dealing with larger numbers of people, bigger issues, the higher up you go, the bigger that number gets. So it's no surprise that none of us are focusing very well. And I mentioned earlier, it's not uncommon to see some variation of multitasking in job descriptions, and it frosts me every time I see it because no matter which peer-reviewed research study I look at, right, usually done at major universities or at some level of serious social science, generally speaking, it's been proven over and over again that human beings don't multitask in the way we talk about it. We tend to think in the Western world, the U.S. in particular, that we've got this kind of unlimited resource of intellectual and cognitive capacity. But part of the reason we've been seeing so much around new laws around texting while driving being illegal, and even now they're finding that just even voice command kinds of things when interacting with a smartphone reduces people's attention more so than they realize, that humans don't multitask in the way that we reference it. We start splintering our focus to some degree. Now, as most of us know, there's some level of multiple things going on for most of us. It's very common for people to have a conversation with somebody in the passenger seat of their car and be perfectly safe while driving. You have muscle memory, you have a lot of things. There's an importance to what you're doing, but there's really almost no visual distraction, and the person in the passenger seat can adapt to you in a way that the technology cannot. I can't tell you how many times I've even tried asking, my Siri voice assistant in my iPhone to do something, and it takes 3 iterations, and the more effort it's taking me to think through that and even give voice commands, my eyes may be on the road, but increasingly I'm giving more and more of my primal cognitive attention to talking to a machine. And if you think about it like whether you think about it in terms of plumbing, like a pipe, or you even think about it in more technical terms, even a broadband connection in a residential neighborhood, if you've been in an area where there's been a lot of development over the last 5 or 10 years, you might start to notice that your internet speeds slow down. Maybe occasionally, if you're on a cable connection, you might get some tiling because everything's coming through a fixed pipe. And the more that gets divided over and over and over again until they do some load balancing in the system, it's going to have initially an impact that won't be noticeable to you, and eventually it crosses a threshold. Our brains work very much the same way. So what we're really doing when we talk about multitasking in busy environments is we're really just rapidly switching our areas of focus. And again, for knowledge work, that doesn't really work very well because all of that switching is great when you're dealing with a lower level task, something that does involve a lot of muscle memory that's almost involuntary. But the things that get us promoted, the things that get us new job opportunities, the things that close the big deals and get us those higher salaries are usually the real value add stuff that takes a higher level of focus. And part of the reason folks get weeded out and selected out, and I mean that in a positive way for advancement and opportunity, is because most people don't do this very well. We constantly switch from one task to another. And we struggle with, no matter how intelligent the client, and I can tell you, I know that they will understand it in concept, but I have had some really high-level executives at like Fortune 50 companies who will nod while I'm explaining elements of this that's specific to their circumstance, and yet it's very hard to break the habit that we've all gotten into of jumping from one thing to another all the time. And all of that it's really sort of a denial, ultimately, that we have a finite level of attention and we're forced to make choices. So the more that we're splintering whatever level of attention we have throughout the day, generally speaking, we start focusing on lower level tasks. And whatever work product we do create, if it's an original, if it's original presentation or a speech or copy for an ad or writing code or whatever it is, the work product will suffer at some level because you don't get that opportunity to really get into what some might call the zone, or really kind of tuning out, kind of get a little bit of healthy tunnel vision around the task that you're doing. The focusing on lower level tasks is a very natural reaction to everything that's going on because you can handle it. You can respond to emails all of the time, and it's sort of a game that never really ends. In fact, they've even done some research and found that when we reply to emails and we can get them out of our inbox and respond or file them, there's a mini kind of reward sensation that the brain is getting that's very similar to a video game. So if you're a gamer or you have someone in your life who is, the problem with that is while that may be at some level initially rewarding and feel good and be kind of fun, it's a never-ending system. You never really finish. So you're always working against the tide, and meanwhile, your functioning continues to erode. In any good gaming system, the faster and the better your skill gets, the faster the either artificial intelligence or the level of play is getting. So, in the extent that the game is a challenge, that's fine, but in the workplace, we're chasing something that we're never really going to achieve, and that tends to replicate in the form of electronic communication. Another underlying thing, besides just the fact that we're always trying to respond to the stuff that's coming in, it's something I call the availability vortex. It's this really false sense that we need to be more available to our bosses, to our colleagues, our employees, our children, our elderly parents that we're taking care of, all at equal levels at the same time. So there's less and less, because we have all these things calling for our attention. Most of the people that we work with have gotten really less skilled at deciding what is of priority importance at any given unit of time. What's been truly difficult about this, and I'll get people who will really argue with me about this, I'm in an era when we're trying very, very hard to be more balanced between our work and our personal life. It's interesting to me that people are still feel that they need to be as available to everybody at the same rate. And inevitably, especially when I do a presentation, I get somebody who will either debate with me, or in this case, since it's unidirectional and you're muted and you can't, somebody will sometimes get offended, especially somebody who's in a parent situation. They have kids and they want to make sure their kids can reach them and in an emergency and so forth. But instead of saying, well, for this particular block of time, my kid is in school, the school can contact me, obviously, if there's anything that's truly urgent. I can take a break every hour or whatever, or 30 minutes or whatever it is to make sure that everything's okay, where every time the phone buzzes or something comes in, we feel like we need to check it because it could be our kids, it could be the nurse's agency calling about something related to mom, right? We tend to accentuate the level of urgency and even the ability that we would have to do anything, even if there really were an emergency. And when I ask people sometimes, why do you feel that you need to be why do you feel like you need to get that email out as quickly as possible? And I play the why game like a child almost would, well, why is that? Why is I go about 3 or 4 levels deep. And psychology is not my discipline as a coach, but it sometimes comes into the work that I do in this way. By the time I get to round 3 or 4, people are always worried, well, what if there's some sort of emergency and, my child is what's most important? And what I always think is interesting is often they're a good 45 minutes to an hour from their child, and if there was a true emergency, it would be the people on scene that would be stabilizing, God forbid, that situation. There's very little that you as an individual are going to be able to do to control that. And we used to be used to and accustomed to that. There was a time when we had a comfort, or at least some familiarity with a sense that there was only so much we could control. And now there's this sense that if I'm not available to look at this one pop-up thing that's come up on my phone in an instant, that maybe someone I care about deeply could be at risk. If you don't have children, I've seen it come up in a professional context as well, the sense that if I don't respond quickly enough, my customer satisfaction ratings won't be high enough because my response time wasn't good, or my boss will think that I'm goofing off and I'm not focused or I'm not engaged at work. And for the most part, all we're really doing is taking what someone else is in their present and making it our present. And as a result of that, nothing's getting prioritized, and we're not in a situation where we're able to decide what should come first. The truth is, people can, in 99.99% of situations, can wait at least a matter of minutes for you to finish something that's really important and for you to focus where you need to. You can't go disappearing completely off the grid necessarily for days or weeks at a time, but generally speaking, for those few things that are really important, we can. And we've become very much conditioned to the need to respond right away in the sense that that's quality work. And there are settings where obviously that is required. If you are in customer service, it really is about the ringing telephone, or if you're doing customer service through social media, it is about response time through whatever social media platform, because that is your area of focus. But otherwise, the internal stuff that kind of churns around, we make it more urgent than it needs to be, at least in our own consciousness, and therefore any system of time management that we put in place tends to not work as well. Because if you're feeling anxious, if I tell you to turn off every alert of every device and every system, for most people that's going to be too cold turkey, and they're almost going to start twitching after about 7 to 10 minutes because they're worried that there's something urgent that they're missing. and it takes a while to kind of detox from that. We do need to react faster than we did in the workplace 25 years ago. It's not that I'm denying that things have changed, but it doesn't always need to be instantaneous. Having some time to reflect and focus is really ever more important now than it was before, where we're doing even less and less service work and even more thought work. The other thing that, of course, ends up happening is people are exhausted and they have a maxed out 8, 9, 10-hour day. They've responded to a million emails and messages of every kind. They've done any one of a number of tasks, filed whatever reports they needed to file, but the high-value stuff that really lets them stand out, that helps them build their business, their nonprofit, whatever value work is really important to them and that really gets them excited about work, it's completely lost and gone. Even when they're with the people that they love and they're so worried about something happening and not being available, they're often not completely present because they're pulled in multiple directions and they sort of feel like they're being tugged in multiple directions. So you end up with a lot of lower level tasks, and that important stuff gets pushed off 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. Before you know it, it's been sitting there and the reminder's been popping up if it's electronic, or it's been on your to-do list for sometimes months, and then the number of important things starts to grow in the number of months, and you haven't really made any progress, and an entire quarter goes by. One of the things I try to help people understand is that there's really, to use the email example a little bit further, there's no such thing as an urgent work email. This is an image of a social media post that we did about a year ago, and I know there's an option to send something urgent, mark it with a red exclamation point, but really, if something is truly urgent, if it's really that important, email would really not be the medium. Because you have something that requires typing, sending, some sort of alert being sent, received by the individual, opened up, read, some sort of response decided on, a typed response, sending, alerting, reading, and it bounces back and forth. That's a million steps. It's incredibly inefficient. Why would you do that for something that's truly important? Even when it comes to text messaging, nowadays, if you're even in a situation, it's almost like people like to challenge me on this and say, what if, what if? But now, even when there are major storms coming through, or God forbid something is happening in a workplace violence situation, a sort of a shelter-in-place kind of thing going on, emergency response now sends that stuff over the major phone network carriers, and it bypasses all of whatever settings you've got on there, and it makes a very unusual sound. If there's truly something that's really that urgent, word's going to get to you. It's not going to, you're not going to miss something via email that comes to a matter of health or safety or the quality of the business or the satisfaction of the customer in a matter of minutes, or even usually in a matter of an hour or two. I even often have to tell my clients frequently, if you send me an email, please understand, I get a lot of emails, I travel, I'm engaging with other clients, they need to have my focus. I'm assuming unless there's something major going on that we've already discussed, or if you don't pick up the phone and call me, that it can wait up to a business day or even 2 business days, because otherwise I would never get done, and I wouldn't be focused on the next person who's relying on my attention. So after all of that, if you're willing to accept that at some level, the fact that something comes in and can be delivered really quickly, the fact that multiple people, of course, have priorities, and we do need to be responsive. We can't blow them off, but we don't need to be responsive in seconds or minutes, or even usually, very rarely, even within the hour. Then it makes it a lot easier to find ways to be a lot more productive and use a number of different strategies. This one is often mentioned in the blogosphere, so some of you may already be familiar with this one, but what almost any client I've ever worked with, and I find it's true with me, and it's true of varying personality types and even different work settings, it's up to you at what unit of interval you do this. If you want to do it on Sunday in order to be prepared for Monday morning, if that's what works for you, great. If you want to do some planning on Monday morning, I do all my planning in the morning and I go from there, but you need to protect some amount of time, at least once a week for the week, once a day for the day. It can be as little as 15 or 20 minutes, but absolutely no distraction. And whether it's, again, night before, morning of, whatever, what is it that's just pick the one thing that is high value, not necessarily the most urgent, but the most important. We often sacrifice what's important on the altar of the urgent, which then means we scramble at the end and produce something that's of lesser quality, or we miss out on opportunities. So take whatever unit of time. Some people need more like 30 minutes. If you get up before everybody else in the house does early in the morning and that's your quiet time when you can actually think, great. If you do it while you're working out or something and that's what works for you, fine. But whatever time is separate from other types of sensory inputs that are requesting your attention, protect that. And just one thing a day that is of high value and that is important for your work, for your goals, for the next whatever step in a process you're trying to achieve. If that's at the very top of your list, whether it be a written list or electronic, and written lists tend to work better for most people because there's something about reinforcing things in writing, but I know some people prefer electronic lists, and that's fine. Whatever is at the top of the list, the must-do, come hell or high water, you make sure that gets done. If it means you have to stay late, if it means that there are some things that wait, if it means that there are meetings that you have to cancel, that one simple thing, or even if it's not simple, if it's 3 hours, is what you're going to attach to your day, and you can commit yourself to that. And then everything else, if you prioritize it, even just loosely, in descending order of priority, you end up with a lot more clarity because as you're jumping from thing to thing throughout the day, you can go to the next item on the list that will fit in whatever unit of time you have. If you only have 15 minutes between meetings, you can pick something that you know is only going to take 15 minutes, but is at least higher up on that priority list. That sequence is going to change almost every day for most people. And if you're doing that and taking the time to think about it, you'll have a lot more success. The next thing that you have to do is when you're thinking about your day, I said commit to doing it. Notice I didn't say when. It becomes the priority, but everybody's a little different, and it's important to shift both, again, as I said, to your own nature as well as the nature of your work. Depending on when you've got the most control of your time and your schedule, or when you know that you tend to be at your best. Morning person, evening person, sometime around lunchtime when everybody else is out and you prefer to eat lunch earlier or later. You schedule that one really important task, and that's what you protect at all costs. If you do that one thing and you hit that, you're even going to fail, honestly, a certain number of times a week, but if about 3 out of 5 days a week, that one thing that's really important, that is of top priority, that you've protected, whether it's 30 minutes or 3 hours, you're going to be producing at a level that's probably 8 to 10 times higher than most of the knowledge workers around you. It's true in academia, it's true in corporate life, it's true in nonprofits, just about everywhere, because most people, they never get that one block of time to do what's really important to their job, to their goals for the year, their objectives, whether those goals and objectives were set by you or someone outside of you, especially if you're earlier in your career. So you schedule that, you protect it. If that means you have to block a conference room, if you're like in a cubicle, open floor plan, in addition to all the technology, there's other distractions, people walking by, the door opening, the FedEx guy showing up, somebody tapping you on the shoulder and asking you a question. Even in an open floor plan environment, people can put on noise-canceling headsets and they have visual distractions throughout their day. If you know that the one thing you need to work on is going to take you about an hour, maybe 45 minutes, you turn everything off, you take your Outlook offline or turn all of the alerts off, and you're able to book a conference room or some other space, or even get out of the office, and use that as more your lunch break or whatever it is that's going to work for you to get that one thing done without distraction in a place that's going to work. That's going to make your life a whole lot easier. You're going to be amazed at how much you get done in the course of a day. To do that, I mentioned knowing yourself, not just your personality, but your physicality. Morning people, evening people, these are things that to a certain extent we can choose and sometimes are chosen for us based on circumstance, but for a lot of us, we have a natural rhythm throughout the day. Just last week, I had a journalist contact me for an interview. I forget which magazine it was, but they were doing an article about the slump that tends to happen in the afternoon post-lunch when we get really kind of tired at work, we're in a situation where, you know, maybe there's a little bit of eye strain, a little bit of headache, a little bit of the post-lunch carb coma, whatever it is. And, you know, how do you sort of, the question from the journalist was really, you know, how do you mitigate that mid-afternoon kind of drop in energy? And most of us don't plan ahead. Once you get to that point and you're in the slump, what most of us do is we're overcorrecting. We boost up on caffeine. There's a reason why 5-hour energy and, you know, all sorts of variations of caffeinated and sugary sorts of things are so popular and are so profitable for beverage companies right now, is we're looking for something to correct. If you're thinking about your natural ebb and flow of when you're able to focus and when you're at your most creative and best throughout the day, the best thing to do is think about the day in its totality and get into a pattern that's going to manage that best for you. The fact of the matter is, you might be in the office for 8-9 hours, but no matter who you are, your level of functioning intellectually is not going to be the same throughout the day. Your blood sugar is changing throughout the day, even if you're in outstanding health. You know, there are other distractions. There are things that impact your mood, something that's frustrating, a coworker says something that's bothersome, the boss dumps something on you. Whatever it is, there's a lot of stuff that even in the healthiest of situations is going to create these boosts and these natural drops and ebbs and flows of energy. It's just human nature. And it's your physical energy, it's your intellectual sort of cognitive energy. To the extent you're a spiritual person, there's even only so much spiritual energy that one could really have in a day. And all of those things we need to manage. For most of us, there's a period of the day where we find, because of our work environment as well as our just internal, you know, biological nature, there are points where our brain is at its best. In order to prepare for that, you want to make sure that you're staying as level as possible for that throughout the day. The way to optimize that peak period isn't just to protect it on your calendar, but to remember the fact that no matter how driven you are, no matter how smart you are, no matter how high octane you might run, and you can, I'm sure, tell from my voice that I run pretty high energy throughout the day. You know, I can change the energy level of a room, people have told me, just because I'm loud and I talk fast and there's an intensity. But even with that, there are points in the day where I just know my work is not going to be as good a quality, even if I have no distraction at all. The best way to manage that is by getting, first of all, once I've got my process around deciding what's important and making that list, putting that one thing, just that one thing, at the top that has to get done. I got to make sure I manage other things throughout the day. Presuming I've had a somewhat decent night's sleep the night before. The other thing that I always manage to do, people talk about breakfast all the time. It's not just important to have breakfast in the day, but it's really important to get some kind of protein in there if you can. For most people, if they have a protein, especially a lean protein in the morning, however you get that into your system, it doesn't have to be a lot, but it does a few things. It tends to control your appetite throughout the day, which means you're less likely to overeat at lunch. Well, that's great for dieting, and dietitians and other folks may talk about that, and, you know, personal trainers and other people who are really into physical fitness and physical wellness may talk about that. It has a huge impact on the quality of your work throughout the day, because if your appetite is spiking and your energy level is spiking, most of us wake up in the morning, we're dragging, maybe we didn't get enough rest, so we over-caffeinate in the morning, we either eat no breakfast or we load up on carbs with our breakfast, and then we get the crash already in the morning. So we've already had our first big drop in our ability to be productive and just focus. Then add to it all the other stresses of the day. Then you eat lunch, you take a break for lunch. If that lunch is more than you need to be taking in, once again, you get a spike in energy and you get a crash. But now you're in your second cycle of that in the day. By the time you get to mid-afternoon, you're spent. And if that's the quietest time and they might leave earlier, or depending on where you are, the way the traffic patterns are in places like California, you know, sometimes maybe that afternoon is the one time when you can get some quiet and really do the stuff that you have to do. Well, if you're crashing, that's not going to work so well. Well, again, at that point, if you've had if you had a more level lunch, rather than trying to self-regulate and say, well, I don't want to overeat at lunch, if you've had that protein, you've had that breakfast, you're not going to want to eat most likely as much at lunch. And that means you're going to get a more moderated spike in your energy throughout the day and your ability to focus. When we talk to kids about testing in school, we always talk about the importance of breakfast. School districts, for needy kids, they often have breakfast as much as they do lunch in the schools because hungry kids, they can't learn. And somehow we think that that doesn't carry over to us as adults. It absolutely does. So if you're able to do that and moderate your food intake and also moderate your caffeine intake, if you take in caffeine at all, you're a lot better off having a steady amount of it, and that isn't obviously not an excessive amount, right? If you're on cup number 7, then it's a problem. But if you're doing all of those things, not only do you not need as many carbs, you don't need as much caffeine, so you can get that last caffeinated beverage of the day if you're feeling a little bit kind of worn out in the afternoon, and it'll give you just that little bit of a boost. The other thing that's really important to remember about your body and its peaks and valleys throughout the day, everybody's talking right now about the fact that sitting still for too long isn't healthy and it's killing us. While that's true, it's really also destroying your work product. We just can't focus for that long, and we're not, as human beings, evolved to work in a digital office space or in a cubicle farm. You know, even the industrial era really wasn't all that long ago in evolutionary time for us as a species. So the artificial world of fluorescent lighting and desks and tones and things from technological devices and staring at a screen, which is not the real world, but it's a digital representation of ideas. All that eye strain, that's it's just not our natural space. So I really always tell the people I work with, and this is also very hard to get people to do, at a bare minimum every hour, you need to be getting up from your desk, no screen time. That doesn't mean that you then get on your personal device and check on your emails and stuff because you're just trading one screen for the other. Get away. Most professionals will tell you need more than this, but again, I sort of realize that there's only so much change that most people can enact at any one time. Every hour on, at whatever interval, make sure that you're at least taking 5 minutes, no screen time, up, moving around. You can be walking around the floor, one flight of stairs, whatever it is. Certainly if the weather's decent and you're in a place where it's safe to walk and there are sidewalks, definitely go outside. But the blood flow is going to increase your cognitive capacity, and it is amazing to me how many folks feel like in those 5 minutes they can just get a few more emails done and then they can get to the next meeting, so they'll take their break the next hour. And they put it off again, they put it off again. They're still stuck in the cyclical kind of mindset that those 5 minutes are going to make a difference, when the best difference they can make is recognizing that they're still biological in nature and they need to step away. Productivity and focus throughout the day, it's very, very similar to what happens with alcohol. By the time someone who's drinking realizes they're too impaired to drive, they were already losing some of their fine motor skill and function long ago. There's now more public service messages about saying if you're buzzed, you're probably over the legal limit to be driving, but at least at some level you're impacted. Once you get that feeling that journalist was asking me about, that you've hit the wall and you can't go any further, the quality of your work and what you were able to put out per unit of time probably started falling off hours before, and you just can't tell. They've measured this, they've studied this, again, peer-reviewed, not junk science, but really disciplined, both social science and natural sciences have gone over and over and over again. And if you measure people's ability on basic cognitive tasks, usually their functioning is starting to drop off long before they can sense it. If you don't take that break to squeeze out that 5 minutes, it's probably costing you 30 minutes or 60 minutes later on. So those people who are hard charging and they're at the office all the time, 60, 70, 80 hours a week, they're mostly just wasting their time, because really at a certain point it's taking them, it's diminishing returns. They're there 2-3 hours to do something that if they took a few breaks and, I'm not saying they have to, eat like they're an athlete, like they're an Olympian, but just leveled off their caffeine intake so it was steady, their protein and carbohydrates just steady throughout the day, they could save themselves a lot more time. They would have a lot more work-life balance. They could spend more time with their kids. They could be more focused on the things that really matter to them. When you're thinking about your settings, the most obvious that I've talked about, of course, is not only turning off your alerts. I take things offline. So Outlook has an option. The Apple Mail app has it as well. You can even selectively do it. So if there's an email address or a text account that's strictly personal and you know you don't get a lot of volume and something's only going to come in if it's really important, maybe you just turn off those others that are getting the 100+ emails or text messages if you get a cell phone from work or whatever. Take it completely offline, because if you don't, something as simple as a little flashing indicator off in the corner is still siphoning off very valuable time. You want to be able to take those breaks for yourself every hour, those 5-minute breaks. And the longer your day is, there are times where, let's face it, you're going to have to put in a 12-hour day because it's just really intense. There's a big project going on, whatever. We can do that in sprints, but we just can't do it all of the time. When you do that, if you're going to have to put in a 12-hour day, what I always tell my clients is make sure that aside from those 5-minute breaks, think of the day in 3- and 4-hour blocks and take 15 minutes in the first 4-hour block of the day, 20 to 25 minutes in the afternoon, and if you have to stay late, another 20 to 25 minutes, and that goes against people's instincts. They want to go home. They're tired. They want to be with their spouse, with their kids. They want to watch TV. They want to kick back and relax. But by not taking that break, they end up staying even later because they're struggling more to figure out what it is they need to do, to come up with ideas, to put together even a coherent sentence in the same amount of time. So by skipping that, they just end up actually staying longer. You're better off taking that break, getting whatever food you need, getting a little bit of movement. You don't have to jump on an elliptical. You don't have to do anything that's, CrossFit intensity. Just that level of movement is naturally going to get some blood flow that's going to really help your cognitive function. One of the ways, by the way, before I forget, there are 2 other things that are less obvious that most people don't think about. There are a lot of settings, both on your phones, tablets, mobile devices, as well as your PC, your laptop, your Mac, that can really help. If you're having trouble, if you're staring at the clock all the time, you have another distraction. One of the things I do is I decide and I set my distractions. So when I'm working in my office and I'm not out and about, there is an audible setting in my operating system that comes standard. It's not an app that you need to pay anything for, but for people who are disabled or impaired at any one of a number of levels, you can actually have the system state the time audibly at a certain interval. I have it do it roughly every 30 minutes because I find it keeps me pacing and conscious of the time. So this little computerized voice, it's 11:30, it's noon, it's 12:30, and that helps me stay focused throughout the day on when I need to take breaks, and I can then be more disciplined instead of saying, let me just get this one more paragraph out, instead of saying, oh wait, you know what, this thing's chirped at me twice now, it's time for me to get up, go walk around, and if I need to, if I have other obligations and responsibilities before I get back to my task, I might take a quick look, make sure everybody's okay, that nothing's blown up, there's no customer that's really angry about something, and then I can get back if I haven't finished that one thing that's really important. You can also do things that reduce eye strain. People often will just naturally accept the defaults that their computer gives them. The things that might be preferential for you, that preference probably comes from someplace. Enlarging the pointer to be from your mouse or your trackpad to be bigger than it would normally be on the screen reduces eye strain. A larger font isn't just there for people who are visually impaired or for those of us once we get past the age of 40 and we start using reading specs. We always presume those things are there just for those folks. No matter how great your vision is, all those hours of staring at a screen, it's not like reading, it's not like staring at ink on a paper. There's blue light that's being emitted from your screen and all of your electronic devices that's wearing you down and fatiguing you at not just a physical level but a cognitive level as well, and it's cumulative. So anything that's going to reduce that amount of strain and focus is going to allow you to focus longer and better. Other things that you can certainly do, there are actually filters that will filter out a certain amount of blue light. There are apps that you can download for your mobile device that limit and adjust the settings and the brightness automatically, so it reduces the eye strain. You can be staring at a tiny little smartphone for half an hour, 45 minutes without realizing that much time has gone by, and you're slowly fatiguing and tiring your body out a lot faster. It's like the difference between running and then running with weights, or running with, if you've ever done that to condition yourself as a way of strengthening, it also tires you out faster. Well, intellectually, those things are tiring you out faster as well. So the fewer distractions you have, the less that you're strained, the less that you're staring at, at something that's really too small for too long a period of time and staring at a screen, that's going to help as well. So if you think about blood flow throughout the day, you think about the kinds of settings that you have on your computer, the contrasting color and light, the size of the fonts, all of those kinds of things, and even those selective alerts, those selective distractions that say, no, really, you need to stop now. You need to take a break right now. I guarantee you that within no more than probably a week, usually 3 to 5 days, if people are able to stick with that, they actually find themselves with more energy at the end of the day. They find they're accomplishing more. They're finding that they're more productive. They're finding they can spend less time at the office, or they've got more time to reallocate to other things at the office. They're spending less time on email in the evenings. They're just ending up more efficient with their time because they're simply more conscious and cognizant of their physical self and their surroundings. Finally, I always wrap with this kind of stuff. If you ever work with a coach, whether it's on career-related stuff, performance stuff like we've just talked about, one of the reasons that certainly helps that we've been vetted through UConn, but not everybody's going to come to us, and that's fine. It's not a regulated industry, so if you hire anybody that you're going to pay money to, whether it's out of your corporate budget or out of your personal budget, I always say that they should have these things no matter what part of the country or even the world you're in. You should be able to talk to clients, not just for someone to say, yeah, these folks are good, but so that you can ask hard questions, the why. Why was this worth money? Why was this worth time? Why did this make sense for you? They should have some kind of code of ethics that they've actually thought about and documented, and they're willing to share with you because it holds them accountable in the same way. And most of this is very straightforward. Fee structure should be really transparent. People shouldn't be putting you under a lot of pressure. They shouldn't be trying to upsell you all the time. It should be a very clear set of goals and objectives and payment solutions up front. They should have certainly contacts and a network that would relate to whatever area of discipline coaching that they're doing, whether it's more consultative or more coaching and development kind of work, whether it's in HR or psychology or recruiters and headhunters and the related professions, because that suggests that somebody's been around a while and they're really embedded in their professional community. They certainly shouldn't, their consults should not be an infomercial. They should really be time where they're just focused on you and helping you, almost like a test drive of services for you. And they should be really careful about the guarantees that they make. Josh has all of my information. If you go onto the Alumni webpage, you can find all of my firm's information. If you go onto my firm's page, you can see the biographies of all the teams, about half a dozen of us, and you can reach us very, very easily. All UConn alums, not only do they get extended free consultative time, but those few who end up becoming clients, because that's appropriate, they get a pretty substantial discount on fees and services, and it's a real discount as opposed to just kind of artificially inflating a price to drop it again. And I know a lot of folks within the UConn alumni community have already taken advantage of that. In fact, we had UConn alum clients before we had the partnership officially with UConn, and it's driven a lot of that, and it's gone really well. I'm going to turn this back over to Josh because there's some stuff coming up for you in the community, and let him wrap.
Thanks so much, John. Appreciate it. I apologize to some of you. There were a few times, John, I'm not sure if you realized there was actually a mic cut out, but I think the gist of your messaging actually did work. I'm assuming that's just the network having some feedback at some point, but I think the majority of information was covered. Really quickly, if you do have questions, I saw there was a hand raised. If you do have a question, unfortunately, I can't do anything with your hand raised. If you can drop that into your question section, which should be a little bit below your ability to click raise your hand. If you do have questions, please throw those in the question box for us, and we'll answer those before we wrap up here with John. But in the meantime, John, I thought it was kind of interesting as you're talking about limiting your distractions. What folks don't necessarily know is that while you're on these webinars, we actually can see when the top screen is actually your prominent screen, or if you're using something else and just listening to us in the background. As I'm saying that, everybody's jumping on right now, and our numbers of attentiveness is driving up to 85%. So apparently you did not see that one coming. So we actually went, John, to a high point of 50% attentiveness during this webinar today. So to your point, everybody has a million things that are on their plate. And even though we want to participate in all these different things, sometimes work just gets the better of us, and we get distracted with other things, whether that's email or personal devices and things of that sort. But I thought it was kind of amusing as you're saying that. By all means, folks, don't worry about that. We're not going to report it to your bosses that you're doing something else or something to that effect, but it's just funny to kind of enhance John's point there.
Well, webinars are always difficult just because of the platform, right? I mean, it's an imperfect way of connecting, but we use it. But sure enough, there are people coming into folks' offices and asking questions, and it's not just because it's not just always about self-control. People want a lot of our time, and it's difficult.
That's it, absolutely. We have people asking for us, from demands of us in all different directions, and I think that's a very valid argument. As we kind of wrap up this season, or should I say this current stretch of webinars, our next webinar is actually going to be taking place in January of 2016. As you can see here, the topic is going to be sound decision making, respond rather than react. I think it's a decent follow-up to John's message today of prioritizing and time management and effectiveness, and really creating opportunity for yourself. As you're working to grow yourself professionally, this may be a great way to kind of pick up additional skills that can help you along the way in really crafting a way to respond and in a productive and appropriate way rather than reacting quickly to certain things. So they will discuss what they call their decision-making triangle, among other things, and they are two UConn alums who are actually up in the Boston area. So hopefully you can join us there. If you want to register for that, you can go to uconnalumni.com/events. And John, seeing no questions, apparently you covered everything. So I think we're in good shape, unless there's any final messages you have to pass along to the folks out here.
No, my guess is we either covered it, people are tired of my voice, or they just looked at the clock and realized they got to get back to work. Well, thank you so much.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us again today. Happy holidays to everybody as you enter into this season, and we will see everybody in 2016.